You don't know anybody around you. You don't know where you are. You don't know where you're ever going. You don't even know your own name sometimes. This is the life that people with Alzheimer's live. And this is including my grandfather, who passed away 6 years ago from Alzheimer's. He didn't even know who I was. He didn't know his own son, my father. He couldn't remember anything, and he couldn't even live on his own. So today I want to tell you about the effects of Alzheimer's, the symptoms of Alzheimer's, and how close we are to finding a cure. So this graph is the number of people who have had Alzheimer's from 1900 to predicted 2050. So right now, we're about right here. And you'll see that there are over 6 million Alzheimer's victims. Most of these, well, you'll see, most of these are people over the age of 85. It's almost about the same with 75 to 84. And then ages 65 to 74, it's not a whole lot, but it's still there. About 500,000, or 1 million, excuse me. So, for those of you that don't know, Alzheimer's is a disease that degrades your memory. You can't think, you can't remember things. It gets to the point where you can't do simple arithmetic, like you couldn't figure out like 1 + 1 = 2. It gets that bad. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, meaning it's a mental disease. It gives you hallucinations. You start seeing things that nobody else sees. You start thinking that somebody's talking to you in your head when nobody is. And then eventually, you even get violent behavior. It increases how much you fight and argue with people. It makes you more volatile. So, another point about Alzheimer's is that it mostly occurs in older people, and this is called late onset. Late onset happens to people over the age of 60. It's the most common form of Alzheimer's, as you saw in that graph. It was over 6 million people. However, there's another form of Alzheimer's called early onset. Early onset means that you got it before the age of 60. Most of the people that get early onset, even though it's rare, are between the ages of 18 and 30. In early onset, it's a lot more deadly. Where Alzheimer's will kill you over the course of 6 to 8 years, early onset will kill you in 2 to 3 years. So now that you know some of the effects of Alzheimer's, I want to excuse me, before I go on, there's a few assumptions about Alzheimer's that aren't true. Ones that hasn't been quite proved yet, but people are pretty sure it has to do with Alzheimer's, is that you get it from blood relatives. Most people with Alzheimer's have been traced back to an ancestor that had Alzheimer's. Things that aren't exactly true are gender. So most people that have Alzheimer's as of 2011 were females, over 65%. This led some people to believe that Alzheimer's is more common to get if you're a female. This hasn't been scientifically proven. So we don't know if being female attributes to having Alzheimer's. This just seems to be the case of percentages. So other assumptions are that high blood pressure is related. I'll get to that later in the cures because that hasn't been scientifically proven, but there are people trying to figure that out. So now that you know the effects, I want to tell you about some of the symptoms. There are 7 stages recorded by doctors of Alzheimer's. The first stage, you have the disease, but nobody could tell. You don't even seem like it. You're acting completely normal. The second stage is also almost completely normal. You might forget a few words. You might, every once in a while, forget a place, but I mean, everybody forgets a word sometimes. Stage 3, that's when things start getting noticeable. You'll start forgetting more names of new people that you've met, names of places that you've been to, place where you put things like house keys. Then stage 4, it just gets worse. You can't do math at that point. You can't remember many names. You probably start forgetting the names of grandchildren, names of a friend that you've known for years. And then stages 5, 6, and 7, from there, just keep going. They get worse and worse and worse until about stage 7, where physical impairment comes on. When you're physically impaired from Alzheimer's, you have trouble getting out of bed, you have trouble going to the bathroom on your own. It gets to the point where you sit down, you sit with your shoulders slouched, and your head facing the ground all the time. So now that you know some of the symptoms and the effects, I want to talk about cures. So Alzheimer's is still a relative mystery in the medical world. People don't know why it's caused, and people don't know how to cure it. However, we've been working on a cure for about 15 years now. There's a lot of different ways that people think it's going to be cured, so I'm just going to talk about 3. These cures range from dietary changes to open brain surgery. So I'm going to start with a dietary change. When you look at people with Alzheimer's, people notice that right here in the brain, specifically the hippocampus, that there's a lack of zinc. Zinc is a metal in your brain that is required for thought. And a lack of zinc is usually found in people who have social illnesses such as dementia or apathy, or in some cases, mental retardation. So this particular experiment tried to supplement people with zinc pills. Unfortunately, the study proved inconclusive and did not find a cure. The second study that I looked up has to do with the high blood pressure. Another thing in the brain that was lacking was glucose. Glucose, of course, being the sugar that goes throughout your body, is broken down and gives you energy to do things. But if there's no glucose in your brain, you don't have energy. If you don't have energy, your brain can't work. So scientists started giving Alzheimer's patients insulin shots. This study is still relatively new, so we don't quite have an answer for that quite yet. The third is gene therapy. And all this has proven so far is that we know which gene Alzheimer's is caused by. But that doesn't mean we can't simply remove it and get rid of Alzheimer's. So at the least, you could go in to a doctor or a scientist, pay a lot of money, and figure out if you have the gene or not. So in the end, Alzheimer's is a mental disease. It degrades your intelligence, your ability to remember things, and eventually your ability to even move. Its symptoms are relatively unnoticeable until it's too late, and cures are still being looked into. My grandfather passed away 6 years ago, as I said, and we knew that he was probably going to die, and all we could do was support him. And I'd ask you, if you knew anybody with Alzheimer's, you would simply support them and try to help them out, because they're having a tough time. Thank you.